All right, good morning. For my applied research, let me give you a little bit of background on what I did here. Instead of choosing one singular bias to focus on, I found a study that talked about two, and how they were connected. And what that was is gender and race. And they wanted to find out, what biases were or were not present in uh, an online forum regarding those races. So what happened with this is that eight fictional identities were created, and they were given names. These are like fictional students, and they were given names that were, I guess, evocative of the particular identity. There was four categories: black student, Chinese student, Indian student, and white student, and then a male and female version of each. So we had eight different fictional students, and then 32 different comments were created. These were comments that were not necessarily real comments that had been posted somewhere, but they were comments that were similar to ones that actual students have made in online forums, and then they just randomly assigned these comments to these fictional students and then posted them in a real online discussion forum to see what the results would be, to measure the responses from instructors and the responses from peers to see who got the most responses, who got the least. What they found out, and this was actually Stanford University conducted this experiment, and there's some pretty interesting results came from it. It showed that 7% of the comments that were posted were replied to. This is for instructors responding to student comments. Only 7% of all of the comments were responded to. And so 7% became the baseline, the average. Some identities had lower, some had higher. You probably could guess that white male had the highest amount of response, and that was up to about 12%. So 12% of those comments from white males were responded to. The lowest amount, less than 4%, belonged to Indian male. So if the fictional student, had a name that was suggestive of an Indian male, they had the least amount of responses from the instructor. There were two other groups besides white male that had an above average response from instructors. That was black female and Chinese female. Everybody else was under that 7% mark. So that's for instructors to students to respond. From peer to peer, students responding to other peers, the baseline was much higher. It was about 70%. So 70% of the comments posted were responded to by students. Much higher rate of response. This time, white males fell below the average at about 68%. White female was up to 80%. And I have a theory on that I'll touch on in just a moment. But another surprising part of this is that all four female groups, white female, Indian female, black female, and Chinese female, were higher than all the male groups. Every single one of them. All the male groups were lower than the female identities. So each time it was a female, it was getting a higher response from real students in this online forum than the fictional male students did. Again, Indian male was the lowest, but it wasn't by much. It wasn't a huge margin this time. Somewhere around 60, looks like about 65%. But everybody else was higher. Indian female, black female, and Chinese female, if they didn't reach that 70% spot, and black female and Indian female did, Chinese females probably about 69.5%. So real close, almost there. So what does that show? It shows that no one particular group is going to be necessarily more or less likely to have a response from their peers, is what we see there. So it's kind of like a more level playing field from the teachers. Why do I feel that the white females got more of a response than everybody else? And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that they are white females, which tend to get a little bit more attention, especially from boys. which is something that you can see a lot of times happening in social media situations. I think that white females are more likely to respond to another white female because they see that as being something safe. It's not something they have to worry about. If a white female, and this is just a theory that I have, if a female comments on a male's post, now they might, in their mind, they might be inviting unwanted attention. And I'm sure we've all seen it before. If you ever go on to Facebook or any kind of social media, all it takes is for a girl to like, quote unquote, like a picture that a male posts, and immediately that male will start messaging the female. This doesn't always happen, but this is something I see happen a lot. The male will interpret that as, oh, she must be attracted to me, I need to send her messages now, and essentially harass her. So I think that females know this, and so they're aware of it, and they try to avoid that. So responding to another female when you're a female is safe. Responding to a male might invite that unwanted attention. You never know. So that is just my theory about that situation. Whether or not that's true, that needs a little bit more research, but that's not really what we're going into right here. Now, there are some surprising results that came out of this, and some things that, some stereotypes that were not supported. For example, there are stereotypes that would favor Chinese and white males within a STEM setting that didn't show any support from that. We also saw that a white instructor was no more or less likely to respond to a white male than a non-white instructor. It was the same. It was, there wasn't anything that showed that there was any kind of favoritism between the type of instructor at all. So the study showed, or dismissed rather, the idea of a discriminatory intentional bias. It wasn't intentional. It actually supported implicit bias more than intentional bias. Implicit basically meaning accidental bias. It wasn't showing anything that the students were, or that teachers and instructors were setting out to specifically exclude one race or one gender over the others. It might have been an accidental thing. There are ways that this can connect to the Einikoff framework that we talked about, a couple of the different standards that were there. For example, if we find the one that I really liked, excuse me a moment, I'm looking over my notes that I have here. Standard B under Domain 3. Establish and maintain open communication channels online and in person with students, educators, and other stakeholders to support student learning. Now that is vital, especially within cyber learning. We have to be in contact with the students. We're not in a classroom with them, so we don't really have the benefit of the students walking in and there they are and we get to talk to them. So responding to them quickly is what we really need to do, and that's something that's big within CCA where I work, because we don't have a brick and mortar situation at all. It's all online 100%. I know I've mentioned that multiple times during the class, that I do not have a classroom. I'm sitting in my classroom right now. This is all I have. I don't have a room that I go to where students come into it. It doesn't exist within CCA. And I know that a lot of the teachers in this class are working in a blended situation where you have a classroom in a building and you also are doing some online stuff. That's not my situation. My situation is 100% teaching online, and that is the way it has been for me for the past year. So for those of you who are in a situation where you're in a building, you actually are within a district that has district demographics, because I don't, because my entire district is the whole state of Pennsylvania. I can have students from anywhere. Basically, the demographics of the state are my quote-unquote district demographics. So, it's quite a much bigger, pot to draw from than a small district that's around. So, that said, I also should add that because I don't have these district demographics, I also don't have access to real personal information about my students. What I can see is their name and where they live, and that's it. So, going back to that study where they chose the fictional students and gave them names evocative of a certain race and gender, that's all I have to go on as well. So I'm seeing about as much as these teachers and instructors were seeing during this study that was conducted. All they saw was a name. That's all I see as well. So I don't really have access to any demographics. I can see gender. It does say gender. And surprisingly, as kind of a sign of the times, there are a number of students that are gender fluid within my class, and there are notes that will say, this student identifies as such and prefers this name. So of course we have to be sensitive to that and follow along with what the student prefers, which is not always easy these days to keep track of all that. But yeah, that's the information I do have as far as their background. I don't have anything else beyond that. Whether they're black, white, Chinese, or Indian, I have no idea. So, but does that matter? No, it doesn't matter. Not when I'm teaching everybody the same thing. And it shouldn't matter, and it doesn't matter, of course. So, that said, I'm sure I had a point on this one. Touch base and go back a little bit and figure out why this is important. Well, this is important because we need to be fair. We cannot show special treatment to one student over the other. Obviously, I think that almost goes without saying. It's disheartening to see that there are some biases that are still there. I don't think it's surprising to find out that they are there as well. It is nice to see that the study didn't support any kind of, there was no support or suggestion of deliberate bias, which was good to know. If anything, there was just the implicit, accidental, maybe even unconscious bias. But it is helpful to know that this is there because this is something that you can make yourself aware of. And if you feel or you catch yourself, accidentally showing some sort of favoritism, you can kind of check that right there and backstep a little bit, backpedal a bit so that you aren't doing that. Within my class, to give you another example, a lot of my students will come into class and submit their lessons blank. They just don't do anything. Now, I have found that there's no evidence to support that the boys do it more than the girls or the girls do it more than the boys, or that students with a name that suggests any specific racial background do it more than anybody else. There's no evidence to support any of that. It's just random. It's completely random, but it does happen from the same students over and over and over again, and I do see that happen. Likewise, I have students that regularly attend class, all my guided lessons, and are very active in my chat. Again, it's not necessarily one gender or race more than another, though in one class in particular, I do have several young ladies who love to talk in my chat. They answer every single question that I pose, and they're always very active, which is great. I always know that they're going to be some of the first ones to show up. Is it because they're females? Not necessarily. They just happen to like the subject matter, which is great. It's an art class, and they love art. They love digital photography, so they're always there. They're always on time for class. There's one other thing I wanted to mention. Let me find it. I apologize. How do we test for understanding? Within the classes. Obviously, tests and projects are a definite part of that. The students have to complete their tests, they have to do the projects and get them done. And I find that the students who attend my class, attend my guided lessons, while it's not required to attend class, that's one of the big things that CCA promotes, is that flexibility. You are not required to attend any class. You are required to do the work, but you don't have to attend a class. But if the students attend my class, and I tell them this all the time, they have an automatic benefit and an advantage over the other students, because now they're getting me to tell them exactly how to go about doing the project. And if there's an easier way to do it, or I'm looking for something other than what the project says, I can tell them. I can say, do it this way, and you'll have an easier time of it, and you get a better grade. Whereas students that do not attend class, they're left to their own devices. They have to go through the material on their own. If they have a question, they can, of course, send me an email or a chat, or even give me a call. But it's quicker and easier if they just come to class. And then they can hear me say, right then, here's a way to go about doing this assignment. Here's the answer to this test, or the question, which you're going to see. When they come to the review, I do my reviews based on questions that I find on the test. I don't keep that information hidden from them either. I say this question will be on the test, so this is what you need to know. If you don't come to the review, you don't get that information. It's not that I'm being, unfair to the other students. By all means, I want everybody to come to class, but I can't exactly go to their house and knock on the door and go log in for them. Not when I have, 200 kids in one class spread out all through Pennsylvania. Obviously, that's out of the question. So I have to rely on them to actually do it, and that is something that is hard to rely on. Out of maybe 200 kids, sometimes I will get 30 or 40 in a class. I never get all of them, and I think that that's to be expected. I don't think that that's a surprise. Some of the teachers I talk to here sometimes will get more, many will get less, but it really just comes down to accountability on the part of the student. They have to decide that they want to show up for class. Now, I know this kind of got a little bit off the subject of the actual study that was done, but again, I found that study to be pretty interesting. There were results that I didn't expect to find, especially the stereotypes of Chinese men and white men, or males, if you prefer, within STEM situations, not having any sort of advantage or not having any more comments or responses to them than anybody else. I just found that to be an interesting thing, and it just comes down to to summarize, we just need to be aware of whatever accidental bias that might be in place, and to try to keep that under control, to keep the playing field not necessarily level, but equal to everyone. Everybody, we always say it's everybody needs to get what they need. We don't give the same thing to everybody, but we give everybody what they need, is essentially what I'm getting at. So I think I've gone on long enough. We're closing in on 20 minutes here, and it's not Sunday, so I'll save the sermon for another time. Thanks very much for listening. Have a great day.